What's going on, my creative collective? Welcome to lesson 54. This is Knock Knock Jokes with Voltaire. It is about neutrality. So, this is a review inspired by lesson 54 from a workbook of A Course in Miracles. And this is a beautiful exploration of not neutrality but paradox. So neutrality to me, there are two things that come to mind immediately when thinking about this particular lesson. One of them is related to and deeply embedded in our creative process and how we make and unmake ourselves. Every single time I record these creativity lessons, this lesson illuminates that neutrality is not about the absence of emotion or absence of, response. It's not the absence of something, it's the presence of so much more. So the presence comes into play when we think about what neutrality represents, and that is the container to be able to hold and witness paradox without needing to fix it. So a lot of the time in the world, we experience paradox and then we feel like we have to rush to fix it. We have to rush to amend it. We have to, charge forward and do something about it because we deem paradox to be bad. But there's a complexity and a nuance that is so beautiful that starts to come to the fore more. And when we try to hold paradox within our own energy, what we can sometimes do is allow judgment or shame or guilt, and did I mention judgment, to come out to play in our energies, because we feel that paradox, and we're taught from a very early age that paradox is in nuance and complexity and holding space for all of these things and carrying them within us. It's much easier to categorize the world in things like black and white, to cast it in monochrome, and to say anything that does not adhere to this must mean this and that. So then this specific definition must come to the fore as true. And that's not wrong. There are many truths. But that itself is a paradox. So what this neutrality does is it doesn't encourage us not to have reactions. What neutrality encourages us to do is to be in the presence of paradox and hold space for it without an equal rush towards the absence of the discomfort that can bring up for us. Because in that discomfort too, should it be there is so much truth. There are teachers, there are deep lessons for us to learn from that. There is so much depth and richness in it. And this paradox that I'm talking about here is really, it can be as much as holding multiple truths, multiple things that are true. Someone's opinion can be true, and my opinion can be true, but then that makes the fundamental truth wrong, right? Not necessarily. It means that this is a depth of thinking, really. This is a thought process. But think about what happens when you encounter paradox in your life. What happens? We often rush towards, and I adhere to this, strong opinions loosely held, right? Strong opinions very loosely held, because at any point in time, new information can come forward that shifts everything for us, that changes things fundamentally, the way we see things, the way we experience things. I mean, they're talking about the Hadron Collider, in July 5th. So, they turned it back on, or are working on turning it on or around July 5th, and that they're doing experiments that could fundamentally change quantum physics, like fundamentally change it. We can rely on black and white thinking at times to control complex truths and to control the way those truths land in us, for us, and around us. So it lends itself well to us being able to control how that feels, because it's very difficult. For example, let's say somebody hurts you, okay? Someone does something that causes harm. That person is not bad forever. That person caused harm in that instance. The complexity is holding space for the fact that there may be pain that arose, but that they are also not bad forever, right? This is the complexity, and this is where we get into, it's almost like a need to control, because in some ways, if we don't feel like we can honor what we feel, our own feelings, then we will turn to, thought patterns or cognitive distortions or cognitive tools, I guess, of denial that allow us to push away the complexity, that allow us to push away the nuance. But we do not live in a world that is easy to understand, and that's what neutrality talks talks about in A Course in Miracles, and that I think is central to creative power and creative capacity, because your own creative power lies in your nuance, and you meeting the nuance and not hating it, not meeting it with judgment, not meeting it with the feeling that you should be anything different, not feeling ashamed or a sense of shame hanging over your head because of your nuances. There are things that, we're always working towards in terms of healing and things we're working on, but holding shame for and carrying shame about the ways that you are a very complex being with complex truths. I know many of us in relationships have been the one who's been harmed and the one who's caused harm. And not a single person can say that they haven't caused that harm. And that's a nuance, that's a complexity, right? And that to push that away and to be anything other than neutral about that would invite us to judge ourselves. That's one of the things, that's one of the powers of A Course in Miracles, is pulling back that veil so that we can see ourselves through the eyes and lenses of forgiveness. And, A Course in Miracles talks about how sin is really just the return to, it's the separation. So the removal of sin, the atonement, or I love this, the Edgar Cayce primer, that book says at-one-ment within ourselves. That is forgiveness. That's how we can forgive ourselves, right? Because that is a sort of separation. It's believing that there's something wrong, and neutrality is a calling back home. It's a calling your power back to yourself. Giving away power, it's calling back the perception that you had given away power, or that someone could take it away, that your power was something that you could hand away to other people, because it's that is true only to the extent that your perception allows for that. So if your perception allows for that, it is not just about calling that energy back, but it's about calling the perception that gave away the energy in the first place, because the energy will return as is needed. It will return without issue. It will just operate in that way. Neutrality is also about, this being a container for paradox and feeling comfortable with seeing it in ourselves and the world around us without a rush to fix it, without a rush to change it, without needing to do anything to amend it in the world, without needing to do anything in the presence of it, because it's okay. And it allows us to see the nuances of something, especially ourselves. It allows us to behold the light in us. The relationship between neutrality and paradox also allows for the removal of the charge of energy. So the ways that energies can become very charged, it helps to discharge that. I use things like running. I use weights. It doesn't have to be an intense weight workout. It's very grounding, though, to stand in a position and to do a fly, to do just a basic bicep curl with something weighted, because it anchors you and it pulls you back into your body, right? So those are things that I do, but that's how you discharge energy. But what I'm talking about is discharging the perception that can get charged, that it's almost like rubbing two balloons together, right? When you rub two balloons together, they get this static charge, and that's what perception can sometimes do, is build up this static charge that we need to discharge. Neutrality returns us to that state of being able to behold the nuance around us, because we remove the charge and the attachment within the perceptions that we have, and that too shapes our expectations of what we see in the world. That too shapes our expectations of what we see outside of us, and how that affects what's within us too. Lesson 54 for A Course in Creativity, knock jokes with Voltaire, talking about neutrality. So if this resonated, please give it a like and subscribe. I'd love to have you on the channel if you are not already here. If you are joining me for my subscriber base, though, thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me, and I really appreciate you, so thank you for that. But if this is where we part, I hope that wherever this finds you on the time-space continuum, morning, afternoon, or night, that it finds you very well, my friends. Take care.